think firstly, no matter what size, whether like China, huge country, United States, huge country, Russia, huge country, Estonia, small country, it doesn't matter what size. But as far as sort of responsibility to build healthy humanity, peaceful, compassionate world, everybody has sort of common responsibility and common interest. In that field, sometimes smaller nation can make better sort of contribution regarding promotion of moral ethics. Moral ethics is the basis of world peace. This is my feeling. And then Tibet, I think Tibetan culture, usually I describe a culture of non-violence, a culture of compassion. So usually I make distinction. Buddhism and Buddhist culture. Buddhism means for Buddhist, for our own practice. Buddhist culture is very much related with the community. So one example, last 4 centuries, some Muslim families, Muslim community, small community in Tibetan capital Lhasa and some other towns, few towns. So these Tibetan Muslim, their religion, their faith, Islam, not Buddhism. But their way of life very much in the spirit of Buddhist culture. So in that extent, I think many different countries, mainly in the West, America, Canada, and many European countries, and then also Australia, more Western-oriented cultural heritage, like that, and New Zealand. Among Christians, among Jews, there's a number of people, and also scientists, a number of people who really showing interest about Tibetan Buddhist culture, like that. So therefore, preservation of Tibetan Buddhist culture, not only interest for 6 million Tibetan people, but also is to some extent, or firstly, I think directly, interest for around 13 millions, 14 millions of traditionally the Buddhists who follow Tibetan Buddhism. That's whole, northern Himalayan range in India, in Nepal, and then North Mongolia, independent Mongolia, and also Inner Mongolia, which is part of China, or autonomous region of China, and then then 3 republics in the Russian Federation. So directly connection to these people. Then some extent, I think, world Tibetan culture of non-violence, culture of compassion, is some relevant. So we try our best under most difficult circumstances. We are trying to preserve that culture. You can also, you see, whenever you have the opportunity, meeting with some Chinese scholars or Chinese some officials, and appropriate occasion, you can express your concern about destruction of your Tibetan culture, these things. And then environmental issue, that also is one very important, because the major rivers which cover from Pakistan up to China, mostly is come from Tibetan plateau. Tibetan pressure. So I think these rivers, on these rivers, I think over billion human beings' life depend on these rivers. So that also is something, I think, that's the environmental issue, no national boundary, and also the issue of humanity. So this, I think, you can take some interest. So, some questions there.
Honest, please.
My name is Hannes Hanso. I work here at the Institute Defense Studies Center. I've been to Tibet twice actually. Both times I cycled through by bicycle through Tibet. So I've seen your country very close by and for quite an extended period of time. However, my question is not about cycling in Tibet, but about politics. Do you think there is any sensible or meaningful compromise possible between the Tibetan government in exile and the current government in Beijing? I mean a compromise solution that is actually good for Tibetan people and a solution that is also enough to satisfy the aspirations of the government of China. Thank you.
Government level, I don't know. I always make distinction, Chinese people and government. Although we try our best, some sort of reach out with Chinese government, last a few decades, but more or less, as they remain, not much of
without result.
without proper result. But our contact with Chinese people, that means intellectuals, some thinkers, writers, some artists, and many students. Last now, I think actually more than 30 years, we always try to reach out Chinese sort of Chinese people as much as we can. And then, particularly after Tiananmen event, the response from Chinese sort of community in foreign country, then becoming more enthusiastic. Previously, when we approached them, they always shy, reluctant. After Tiananmen, many actually come forward to us like that. Then particularly last 2 years, since 2008 crisis, number of Chinese, now they seriously, seriously concerned about Tibetan problems. So what's the people's level? You see, there are increasing number who really showing how to solve this problem. There are serious concern. So, ultimately, I believe people are the real sort of master of that of any country. Government, although the communist government compared democratic country government more longer period. Democratic countries, the government, each election, some change. So the communists, everything depend on their wish. So they handed over the government to the next people. Still, government, there's limitation of the judiciary. It will change. So now, observe the last 60 years of the history of China, the Mao's era, Deng Xiaoping era, Jiang Zemin era, and Wu Jintao era. There is big differences. So there is no other way except China must go along world trend. That's openness, democracy, rule of law. There's no other way. The very powerful Soviet Union changed. That change really brought a lot of sort of fear in China. So accordingly they make a lot of sort of that restriction. But now 21st century, the time for century of information, very difficult to control everything. So things will changing. So that's a hopeful sign. Meanwhile, Tibetan spirit inside Tibet extremely strong. Then also the last about over 2 years, we noticed over around 1,000 articles in Chinese language wrote by Chinese. All of them fully support about our middle wave approach and very much critical about their own government policy, like that. This is very encouraging.
More questions? Anyone?
No question?
I will ask.
Silent meditation.
I will ask myself. Do you consider it possible that the same fate will wait to China that was the fate of Soviet Union? I mean, we are celebrating the collapse of the Soviet Union, 20 years of it these days. Do you think the same thing can happen to China, or is it likely that China will democratize, remaining intact?
Yes, basically, as I mentioned earlier, the totalitarian system, no future. However, there's big differences. Soviet Union, the economic difficulties. China, economic condition much improved. So ordinary millions of Chinese, some kind of sort of satisfaction. Their day-to-day life much improved. And then I think they control people. Sometimes I feel the Russian bear is a little bit, compare Chinese dragon, the Russian bear, a little bit more honest. One sort of reason during Soviet Union, Sakharov came. I met few occasions the Sakharov wife. Now she also passed away. Very sad. And then 가서 바스티나사데. 바스티나사지사 우스미아 대청에 가서
Socialism.
Correct, socialism, yes. So you see, few individuals who express this in more sort of freely in Soviet Union, possible. In China, impossible. And then, during Soviet Union, under the leadership of Lenin, Soviet Constitution actually courageously mentioned different republics also have the right to become independent. Chinese Constitution never say that. And then also, in Soviet Union sort of case, the very name of Soviet Union, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, no word of Russia. China, people talk of China. Tibetans are not Chinese, but they use the China. So, I don't know, I think you may not agree that, because you suffer under Soviet control. But me, from distance, looks Soviet. And then also those who say republics, they still kept the local language, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, karmic here. These are the local word is kept. Chinese, Xizang, Chinese word, not Tibetan. We have our own sort of word. They never use per. Xizang. Like that, in Xinjiang, Chinese word, not Uyghur language. So like that, you see, in Chinese case, you see, they are sort of,
domination.
even language, even name. Nowadays, many parts of Tibet, the Chinese give new name. Recently, one Tibetan who visited Tibet, he told me, when he referred the name of his own sort of area, original name, nobody knows. Because recent times the Chinese give new name. I think we can understand, it can, because of understandable, Tibetan word, Chinese tongue, difficult to pronounce. So they prefer one Chinese word, that's more easier. Like Sarah. They never speak properly, Ra. So instead of Sarah, they usually say Sela like that. So they prefer, you see, new name which they can pronounce properly, like that. So they collapse, like Soviet Union. I think take time. Not easy. But difficult to predict. And then also, you see, I have, you see, some sort of different views. In China, the totalitarian system collapsed overnight. Then there could be a lot of chaotic situation that nobody's interest. So gradual change is better. So for that reason, I expressing now these days, last few years, I'm not sort of asking Chinese brothers, sisters, when I met, you must sort of develop democracy overnight. I never said that. I mentioned it may not be interest, not only Chinese, but also neighboring states. So gradual change. Now, in any way, China must sort of take action, initiative that free information, no censorship. Reason I usually mention, 1.3 billion Chinese people have every right to know the reality. Then 1.3 billion Chinese people, once they know the reality, they also have the ability to judge what is wrong, what is right. So therefore, censorship, created distorted information, is immoral. Actually, they always call people's government, people's republic. There's no basis to fool their own people, isn't it? Censorship cannot sort of censor outside the world, only within China. We notice, you see, even government sort of magazines or some news, there are differences in Tibetan language, and locally, and Chinese language, and English language, even from same source, same department, differences. So they always, you see, something hype, something exaggerate, always do that. So that's fooling their own people. So the censorship must stop, must give free information. Then the Chinese judiciary system must live to
Must reach the standard.
must improve, reach the international standard of legal system, which is independent from the government. Even American president sometimes lives with the difficulties. And then Taiwan's former president now become prisoner. One way I feel sad. You see, I know him very well, so I consider him as a good friend of mine, of also Tibet. Now he become prisoner. But that also is one way good. You see, even former president under law, same. So if some guilty found, have to go prison. Good. Like that. I think Brezhnev put in prison. Unthinkable, isn't it? Like that.
Thank you.
So overall, no matter how powerful People's Republic of China, still part of the world. So China have to go along world trend. That's open society or democratic society. And Northern African event clearly so demonstrated. Now whole world is trapped that way. So that's why you see my sort of decision. The now nearly 4th century old Tibetan tradition, Dalai Lama institution as a head of both political and spirituality. That I deliberately, voluntarily ended. So, although you see this decision, since I think almost 5 decades, I sort of, right from the beginning, I had that vision. Now 2001, we already achieved elected political leadership. Since then, my position is a semi-retired position. Now, the 2008, right? 2011. Now that almost 4th century old tradition end. Not due to some pressure, but voluntarily, happily, proudly, I entered. So that's part of my practice. We are not remain behind the world trend. I think in some extent we can teach Chinese Communist hardliner. This is the right way. Independent Mongolia and also Inner Mongolia, which is part of China, or autonomous region of China, and then then 3 republics in the Russian Federation. So directly connection to these people. Then some extent, I think, world Tibetan culture of non-violence, culture of compassion, is some relevant. So we try our best under most difficult circumstances. We are trying to preserve that culture. You can also, you see, whenever you have the opportunity, meeting with some Chinese scholars, some Muslim families, Muslim community, small community in Tibetan capital Lhasa and some other few towns. So these Tibetan Muslim, their religion, their faith, Islam, not Buddhism. But their way of life very much in the spirit of Buddhist culture. So in that extent, I think many different countries, mainly in the West, America, Canada, and many European countries, and then also Australia, more Western-oriented food cultural heritage, like that, and New Zealand. I think firstly, no matter what size, whether like China, huge country, United States, huge country, Russia, huge country, Estonia, small country, it doesn't matter what size. But as far as sort of responsibility to build healthy humanity, peaceful, compassionate world, everybody has sort of common responsibility and common interest. In that field, sometimes smaller nation can make better among Christians, among Jews. There's a number of people, and also scientists, number of people who really showing interest about Tibetan Buddhist culture, like that. So therefore, preservation of Tibetan Buddhist culture, not only interest for 6 million Tibetan people, but also is to some extent, or firstly, I think directly, interest for around 13 millions, 14 millions of traditionally the Buddhists who follow Tibetan Buddhism. That's whole, northern Himalayan range in India, in Nepal, and then North Mongolia, in sort of contribution regarding promotion of moral ethics. Moral ethics is the basis of world peace. This is my feeling. And then Tibet, I think Tibetan culture, usually I describe a culture of non-violence, a culture of compassion. So usually I make distinction. Buddhism and Buddhist culture. Buddhism means for Buddhist, for our own practice. Buddhist culture is very much related with the community. So one example, last 4 centuries,